I think it is very important that you sit down and have a good think about what your AI should actually solve. I don't think that the overall process of, okay, let's do AI, there's a data set, let's see what comes out the other end, that won't work. So you'll have to have a very good idea of what you actually want it to do. And then you can start to look into automations and measure your success with AI.
Hello and welcome back to the Hypercube podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Markus Dirnbacher. Markus, would you introduce yourself, please, for the audience?
Thank you, Adam, for having me. My name is Markus Dirnbacher. I am working for Innova Renewables as a senior operations manager and very excited to talking to you today.
Amazing. So you've got quite the impressive career in energy, looking at quite a few roles. Could you just expand on why did you pick energy and talk through some of that career journey for us, please?
Definitely. I think story time. So it goes back to I'm from Austria, and as we imagine, back in the day, we had lots of snow. We had frozen lakes everywhere, and I really enjoy the outdoors. But over the time, I realized that we gone down from a meter or two of snow in the winter to just a little bit. The lakes weren't frozen anymore, so we couldn't go for pond hockey with my mates and these sort of things. So I started to get interested into what is actually happening, and when I got closer to university and started to think what I want to do with my life in the long term and what I want to spend my day to day with, I was drawn towards energy, and thinking about how I can have the biggest positive impact with what I do day to day. And that led me towards the renewable energy industry. And I started in my master's a work experience at a solar O&M company, where I then ended up to stay for 7 years. And that was the kickstart, basically. Yeah.
Amazing, very cool. And it's funny when you see so many people in energy. I say this all the time, but because I've had the benefit of working across a few industries before I settled on energy myself, especially as a consultant as well. You see a lot of other businesses, and unlike anywhere else I've ever seen, you get a wealth of really talented people that could probably go off and get triple, 4 times their salary working for banks or big tech and things like that, but they stay for the kind of reasons that you've cited there. They want to actually do something with their career and with their life that has a real impact, not just optimizing shopping baskets for some massive multinational shop or something. And I just think it's really, it's always really interesting to hear story time. So thanks very much. That's really cool. I've never played pond hockey. So if I ever get to Austria, you'll have to teach me.
Yes. If we have ice, yeah.
If you have ice, I'll bring mine.
Yeah.
What about Innova then? Could you just expand on what Innova do and who they are for some of the audience that might not know?
Innova Renewables is a vertically integrated renewable energy company. And we have an internal, highly skilled team of engineers, site delivery professionals, and then operations, where I come into the game. And we see sites through. From planning to operations. We have certain different partnerships in the market that help with delivering these projects. And that is the general business case of what we are trying to do at Innova.
And where are these assets?
Most of them are in England. There's a couple of them in Wales, a couple of them in Scotland, but everything is UK based.
Yeah, okay. That's you must have a really well-oiled machine, that kind of gone through the motions of developing so many sites and assets and handing them over to operations. Is that the case? Have you really perfected that process?
It is a lot of assets. Saying that we are really starting up now. So we have roughly 100 megawatts in operation at the moment. This starts, of course, with our development department. Yes, they have a very good process. It's a very well-oiled machine to have all these critical permissions in place to get to ready to build. So they do the very good job upfront. And then we have our engineering department internally that work with the EPCs and our delivery project managers that then go alongside the EPCs in constructing these assets. And everything goes well. It comes to me at provisional acceptance. And then we are in for the 40 years of the solar life cycle.
And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about that is there must be like this massive handover piece where, and I'm thinking like data dump where you're getting like checklists of things gone over and handover of controls and systems and reports and things.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, that must be quite an interesting time when that's going on.
that's the advantage of having an in-house development department and all the project management as well is that this structure of data is set in the beginning and it
Mm,
grows over time. So from my past, it often happened when you were handed over a site that half of the documents were missing. The
mm,
big advantage here with us is that we basically structure in the beginning of every project, and it depends a little bit on your route to market. For example, if it is a CfD site, you have to deliver certain documents at I think it when it comes to PAC to prove that you have built the site that you were promising. So we can set the targets in the beginning of what data will be required further down the line. And basically then tick off these checkboxes if once we get to these and have it all in our folder structure ideally. And then it's just a matter of from the project development manager giving it to the project manager, then the construction project manager, and then on to me. And we all work on the same folder structure to have it all nice and safe and readily available.
Yeah, and like we'll have quite a few people in the audience that probably have never developed a site or looked at that world. Like I've never developed a site, but I've consulted into these things, and that's not like it's not like a few files, is it? We're talking like thousands of
Yes,
contractors and
it's
contracts and stuff, right?
thousands. It's gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes all over the place. So you have to be structured and organized. That is critical for even the success of the project in the end. Is definitely
Mm-hmm.
it's not an
And
easy task. Yeah.
no, and that I guess yeah, that structure, the way you're doing it, that becomes IP, like in and of itself, and because it baffles me. So we were actually in the early design phases of developing like a piece of software that's going to look at this because there's nothing out there that's bespoke for this use case, like developing sites for the energy system. And we talked to so many people that maybe aren't as mature in their processes as you are, and it's just like a hodgepodge of email and
Yeah.
PDF and
Yeah.
random ERP systems and
Exactly, and it's a big risk. So if at certain stages of the project stakeholders leave and the data is in their inboxes, it can get lost.
exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that is a problem. So you have to think about that. How you handle this data is very important. Yeah.
Okay, so right, let's move past that a little bit. So, senior operations manager, could you talk us through like a typical day? Like, what does that mean?
There is no such thing as a typical day.
Right, good.
Every day is different. The thing with operations and asset management, what I'm doing at Innova, I'm involved in many different departments. So that starts with the planning team when we talk about, for example, landscaping, because usually you start once the site is constructed, then you start with all the tree planting, hedgerows, and these sort of things. Um, and it depends on what your planning department promised for to get the site through planning, and if that is also ideal to do or practical to do, which sometimes it isn't, and we need to slightly change the plan. So that means I have input already in very, very early stages of the projects. It goes through to design decisions of how can we optimize a solar farm, thinking about the 40 years of its life cycle. So there's sometimes questions in this area. It goes to contractual management of negotiating different sort of contracts with suppliers or the O&M contractor, and that sort of aspect. And then it starts to go into the performance of the solar assets. If there's issues, if there's performance issues, contractual issues, other sorts of risks. And to summarize a day, I think the overarching constant is it's problem solving. There is problems constantly, but nothing that can't be solved at the end of the day. All for the good of the asset and for generating renewable energy. And bottom line, I think that the best description of a day to day is problem solving. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. It makes me wonder, do you have a favourite site and a least favourite? Is there like, and are you allowed to say, or yeah?
I don't think I'm allowed to say, but definitely. And I think if you ask any asset manager or even in construction, there always is the one site that is not going absolutely to plan. But it's again problem solving and getting this site to also live up to expectations. And saying that if you get these kind of problems, it's very interesting because that's when the learning happens again. If you're faced with stuff that you haven't seen before, and you have to go into the deep dive and really figure out what's happening. So that is always a very rewarding process in the end. Then when you get there, might not feel that way whilst you're stuck in the middle, but once you get there and you have the desired result, it's always very rewarding. Yeah.
So we touched on management of like gigabytes of documents, and in my experience of speaking to people lots of roles, there's a lot of like looking at either project plans or going over specifications or reviewing contracts from like a long time ago with something was agreed. Just interested to know, are you starting to see is anyone like over looking at using AI for some of that like text crunching or some of that workflow? What kind of use cases are you seeing that be beneficial?
Yes. So what we are doing now is overall in the company, we're building a data lake. In that data lake, there will be a data warehouse for operational data specifically, but the entire company is looking into that. So if we think about what AI is doing and how we can leverage it, I think it is best explained with it eliminates process. You have a problem and you get a solution. What we need to come around with is, do you trust your solution that much that you can let the AI go and do its thing, or you don't? And that heavily depends on your data set in the beginning. The quality of data, validity, continuity, if you don't have data gaps and these sort of things in every part of the business. And then I think it is very important that you sit down and have a good think about what your AI should actually solve. I don't think that the overall process of, okay, let's do AI, there's a data set, let's see what comes out the other end, that won't work. So you'll have to have a very good idea of what you actually want it to do. And then you can start to look into automations and measure your success with AI. If you have certain processes, mainly admin, and that's for me the goal of AI in the short term, to get the admin off the table and let AI do this kind of work. But yeah, we were quite active in this space starting this year really, to look into the details and define processes that we could see AI working very well.
That's really interesting, and it sounds like you're quite a bit further on than lots of the other people we talk to in this kind of space, because although like there was this big hype around data lakes and that kind of lakehouse storage and stuff like that, years back. It doesn't seem to have made its way to the energy sector, any of that discussion. And lots of people, when we talk to them, it's like a new concept. So it's interesting to hear that that's under development. I'd absolutely love to get under the hood and have a look at what you're doing
Yeah.
and how that's being done. But maybe now's not the call.
Uh, the details, yeah, we would need to talk to other people as well to get under the hood. But I think what you say is quite right, and energy industry being late probably is because we had these 5 megawatt feed-in tariff sites in the past. Um, they just made the business case. The bottom line was good because the price for the electricity generated was really good, and there was no absolute need to go into the details and kind of figure out the another 0.5% of performance somehow. But now that the energy landscape is changing, it becomes more and more important to optimize performance, and that only is possible if you have that data, and you can look into where to adjust and get a better outcome. So I think that might be a reason. It's just maturing in the industry, I think, as well.
Yeah, so that is really interesting. I think you've talked about like using the AI piece to do the admin, and I think that's in the kind of the development operations, the early stage of a project lifecycle. Actually, like that is one of the most valuable easy wins like that we could get after, and where the current tooling, and because this technology is like accelerating and actually the industry doesn't really know what it's best at yet. Everyone's trying to figure
Mm-hmm.
this out. So before we hook it up to like controlling these big super expensive assets and letting them take over, like actually the admin piece is wonderful. But I'd be interested to know, is that that vision of what you want to do with it, is that the Innova strategy for it, or is that just like a personal because that's your domain, or is Innova got sights on like other big wins?
So the Innova approach to AI is we are happy to look into applications that make sense. I've taken that approach into my area of expertise, which is it starts even before getting huge insights into how your solar farms perform. So first applications would be the data gathering. We have different sort of assets. We will have different inverters, and different data streams coming towards our data warehouse. So the first task is to normalize all of this
Mm-hmm.
data, and have it readily available to analyze. And then the first applications of AI and machine learning start. So what happens if you are missing data from pyranometers? Usually you have more pyranometers at a solar farm. And what happens if one of them doesn't send data? So historically, you might have taken satellite data and manually inputted that. Um, the benefit of that is somewhat questionable because of the accuracy. But now with machine learning, you could look into calculating the irradiation data for that one sensor, for example, by looking into the history, how it reacted to the other pyranometers on site. And the AI input could be to automate that. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever this kind of fault happens, your data set is not interrupted, you don't have a gap, you won't have an error coming out at the equation in the end, but it's backfilled with actually calculated data. And then the next step would be what happens if the parameter comes back. It was just a communication issue and the data is available. Do you replace it? Do you keep the calculated data? And that would be some practical applications in the first data gathering
Mm-hmm.
aspect before we even go to, okay, now let's combine inverters on advanced analytics and how they perform against each other, and get into predictive maintenance in a sense of, okay, what's going to fail next. So that's what I meant with, you have to know very well what you actually want to solve with AI, and do tiny little steps, and get your automations in before you take over the entire big picture of I want to do it everything. It's like,
I I couldn't agree more. I totally think that that is the way I gave a talk yesterday about this very thing, how there's a lot of like FOMO driven development going on, and like people are saying, all right, we need an AI, and so they invest something, and there's an illusion of progress, like really fast pace on the technology front, because these tools do that, but that runs this massive risk of doing the wrong thing too quickly, or
Mhm.
whereas those small use cases prove it and iterate, like find nice, self-contained, easily verifiable, easily testable, modular things that will scale, and then that slow, steady march towards like a higher value,
Yes.
I think is just a really good way to tackle this. And I think actually just the way you talk about that as well, like chronometers, communications issues, transformers, I think it doubles down on the hunch I always had about the energy sector, is that you you can't just go and farm this stuff out to random tech companies either, because they just don't. It's so complicated. Like what you're talking about is so in depth, so complicated that it would take someone that didn't know the energy sector quite a long time to get up to speed with even understanding the question you've asked of them and stuff like that.
Yes, I think it is. You need highly specialized people looking into that, because you need a little bit of background of what actually happens on site, and what causes these issues, and then to have a bit of knowledge. Is it just a communications issue, or is the equipment down, to draw your correct conclusions afterwards? So yes, definitely you need a background in knowing how solar actually works, or BESS will be the same, to draw the right conclusions then. Yes.
Amazing. And you, 6 of your solar projects recently were awarded CfDs in the AR6 auction, right? How's that kind of support your ambitions, and what does that mean for those projects?
CFD is just a brilliant process, I think, of giving stability to a developer. So with solar, the value of your project heavily depends on the power price. So there's certain times of the year where, or the year, or in a bigger perspective as well, where it makes sense to build a project because, for example, the module prices are low, or transformer prices are low, and power prices are high. Sometimes the power prices are low, and the equipment prices are high, and it doesn't make that much sense. What the CFD does, it gives you that stability of a strike price, for that project, for lifetime. And the government guarantees you, if the power price is below that strike price, they'll pay the difference. If the power price is above, they'll get the upside. It just makes projects bankable, and it sometimes
Mm-hmm.
makes or breaks projects. It could have an effect of a project that might have been dead before, to get it back to life, because suddenly you have that bankability, and it will deliver these revenues over time, and then it makes sense to build it.
Yeah, and it unlocks like a different group of investors as well, because some like the big pension funds and stuff just won't go near the volatility. They want that long term security, and it can really, like, it's like a non-linear process. It's like that's even a slight change to a little bit more stability unlocks like a load more funding and makes the whole project
Yes,
much more viable.
absolutely. Yeah, it makes it easier for um, large capital to flow into the renewable
Mm-hmm.
markets. Yeah.
So, what are the like key challenges from where you sit? Like looking at BESS projects, looking at solar, what are some of the key challenges, the really knotty problems that we're having, like generally? And then, if you could share anything about any secret sauce about how Innova are like innovating their way around them, I think that'd be really interesting.
I've just been at a conference this week, and a similar question was asked. What is the biggest problem in the UK, to deploy renewable energy projects? And unanimously, grid connection. Um, oh yes, there's, if you go and want a grid connection, it could be in 15 years time. So that's no good for anybody. But saying that, what I've seen recently, and I'm not 100% on top of it yet, with the grid reform, where they want to go away from first come first served to a more developed approach, where ready to build sites will be taken forward in the queue and make it more realistic to develop your projects. So I think overall, industry-wide, this is the biggest hurdle to overcome. In the next couple of years, we will need investment in the grid infrastructure, and we will need this clear process of knowing when you can plug into the grid. For Innova, I think we are in a quite good position in that aspect. We have the grid connections, but that is work of the past. How you work around that now, if you want to enter that stage, is and again, I'm not 100% on top of the new grid reform now, but if you develop your projects to a ready to build stage, you might be able to skip the queue a little and then get in front and get better connection dates. That involves the entire development process. So the further and the better your project is developed, the potentially better place in the queue you might get. But how to do that is a different question.
Yeah. And what about like market and regulatory hurdles? Is there anything in that space that you've got strong opinions on or hot takes? And
I think it really is regulatory, the grid. The market does the rest. So what the biggest problem in the market currently is the long lead times for, let's say, transformers that take up to 2 years, which can also have a big impact on your project if you have that long breath to be able to deliver it. But the market usually regulates itself, and especially with the big renewables push, you need to work on your supply chain. You need to have strong partnerships, frameworks in place to be able to get your hands on that equipment in time. But that's a market topic that you can probably influence better than the regulatory side.
I think it's interesting, us like anecdotal, and I'd need to do a bit more research, but a lot of the people I've spoken to and the organisations that we work with really commit to very long-term, very deep partnerships with like one supplier for parts of the chain, and kind of through thick and thin figure this out together. And it's quite an interesting approach because it's not something you see as often in some other industries. It's quite like, and I guess it's because so much of this technology is so new, and like you've got to take the bet that okay, that supplier is developing alongside me, and we're kind of building this chain as we go.
Yeah, I think going forward it will be more difficult to put all your eggs in one basket, especially because of what you said. If we look at BESS, the technology kind of changes, I don't know, every other month. And there is advancements here and advancements there, and the containers grow in capacity, and we are now at I think six megawatt hours per container or something like that, which is a huge step. So what is it going to be in a year or two? Which technology is going to be the winning one? So you probably have to have a couple of partnerships to de-risk the technology advancement and be able to react and be flexible to get the best solution for your project in the end. Other framework agreements, if we talk at solar, usually with the panels, you want the tier one solar panels, and framework agreements do make a lot of sense there, which also gives stability in terms of if you commit to a certain amount of megawatts with one supplier, you can maybe lock in a price to also help your business case with delivering the solar farms and have that continuous supply that you need.
It's such an interesting place. Like it's just the numbers of different like roles and skill sets and professionals that you need to like link all this up end to end. It often baffles me because like you could spend 100 days speaking to 100 different people at any organization like Innova and probably have 300 different conversations like about what a day of the life looks like, and bringing it always fascinates like that companies can bring such a diverse team of people together and really make it happen. Like, it's really cool to see. I guess with the changing pace of things, and just like interested, how do you find like attracting the right talent and the right people, and especially like data and techie people? Like, is that easy for what you're doing because it's so exciting, or is that a struggle?
I think it is a struggle. The entire industry is recruiting, so it is growing. It will be growing for the next years to come. So there is a fight for talent in the market, definitely. The data aspect is new. So as we've touched on it earlier, it wasn't in the spotlight a couple of years ago, in solar especially, but it's coming more and more in the spotlight, and how to attract people that probably are more located in tech and working for big corporations, to come to the sunny side, and work for smaller but more maybe flexible and interesting companies, in terms of having an impact on the power infrastructure. So we have a very, very good HR people department, that are very active in that space. What I'm trying to do is to go into cooperations with universities, and working on research projects in terms of predictive maintenance, and try to attract talent this way, to give them an entrance into that industry by having a interesting project, or maybe it's a PhD or whatever we can offer, to have first-hand experience in these assets, and really develop something meaningful. That's my approach, and Innova's approach in general, to try to get the best talent there.
The university kind of approach makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of very clever people in academia that want to make this transition to industry, and I think the energy industry lends itself well to an easy landing for those people. Like, some other industries don't, and it's but yeah, like, people are excited. I think people are starting to catch a whiff of how complicated and how fun energy can be, and how techy and versatile. And so it'd be interesting to see how it plays out over the next 5 years, because like, you see all these curves and predictions of like battery assets going through the roof and renewables going through the roof, and you're like, yeah, but who's doing that work? Like, yeah, what about the humans that are going to be involved and actually making that graph climb? I wanted to touch on, before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to touch on, you're co-founder of a blog, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us about that?
My COVID project, electrifying.world. Yes, when I came to the UK, that was in May 2019, and then COVID started in 2020, I think in March. So there was a lot of free time suddenly, sitting in my flat in Hereford in UK, whereas not much around it as well. So I talked to a friend. We usually talked a lot about different sort of technologies and interested in that. And we just decided, yeah, okay, let's make a blog. Let's write down our thoughts, what we think about different sort of topics. And also, maybe my biggest reason to do it was to develop my writing skills, and then my English skills in general. I'm not that active anymore. I try every now and then to have a blog post coming out, but it was really intense back then in COVID, where we've put a couple of posts together. And I will try to be more active again on the blog post, to report about my learnings in the industry, and with that writing, to go deeper into topics and learn myself.
Yeah, I totally recommend that. Like, as a writer, blogger, for years and years, I think it's the best way to learn anything. And I always say, like, if you ever find any technical content online that I wrote, I guarantee I wrote it as I was learning it, because I found that trying to translate what I'm doing into like notes and like a tutorial really sharpened my mind on stuff. And I think for people out there looking for jobs and stuff, having a big public like presence and sharing your thinking and work very publicly has done wonders for my career anyway, and I think it's super valuable. Okay, so look, fascinating conversation. I guess any final remarks or hot takes or any juicy insider stuff you want to share or stuff you want to say before we wrap up?
I think to wrap up the conversation around AI is take it easy, take it step by step, really spend some time in thinking about what you want to do. Put up a list of potential automations. If you can imagine it could be automated, it probably can. But then think about the process and getting it to paper and then into reality will be extremely helpful going forward. I'm doing the same thing, constantly thinking about, or mainly the things that annoy me, the admin tasks. How can I automate them? And if you kind of develop that mindset and find a way to then finally get it automated, that's a really big win.
Amazing. Well, before we let anyone go, I always like to ask if our audience want to find out more about Innova or you, or if you've got anything you want to promote or plug, where should we point them?
Definitely have a look at innova.co.uk, our homepage. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn anytime, Markus Dirnbacher. Looking forward to your messages.
Amazing. Well, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Markus. And yeah, best of luck with all your sites coming online. You're going to have a busy few years.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
I know I always say this, but that was such a great conversation I just had with Markus. It's really interesting to see how actually far ahead they are in their thinking about data and AI compared to a lot of the people we talk to in the industry. When on the surface, like, that's not a core part of their messaging, but what you would maybe expect from someone or an organization that's developed 60 sites. It's almost like he parroted like all the stuff that we always talk about at Hypercube. So it was a really fun conversation to have because I think we were really aligned and on the same page. They're talking a lot about, do you trust the data you're getting? Can you verify it? Like, how does that work? They're looking at AI use cases and starting with small, quick wins that are more probably leaning towards the admin side of the work, which is great because like everyone's terrified of losing jobs. But if it's like the admin bits that really bog down a job, that's less scary. And I believe for where the technology is, that's a really good place to play just now. And then iterating that to this kind of more advanced, more complex solution. They're building a company-wide data warehouse and data lake and all that. Really interesting conversation. Fascinating to hear about the complexities of being an ops manager at a company like Innova. And yeah, just all round really good guest. So thank you for listening. And I look forward to many more positive conversations.